What's going on, everyone? It's me here. And after spending last week discussing the importance of saving money in your 20s, specifically the reasons that you should do it and how to start doing it today, we're gonna be talking about when to revisit your saving strategy and how often you should be doing this. Now, although you should absolutely have some sort of emergency fund set aside at all times, there's no need to sacrifice your entire social life for an account that will never go down in value. So let's discuss exactly what you need to know about when to check your savings plan, how much you should have saved by a certain age, and then finally how you could put yourself in a position to save even more money while still having a fun social life. Although before we start, as usual, if you appreciate videos like this, all I ask for in return is that you hit the like button or subscribe if you haven't done that already. Doing that helps out tremendously and is a thank you very much. Alright, so first let's talk about why it's important to revisit your saving strategy at all. After all, once you come up with a plan, shouldn't that just stay consistent throughout the rest of your life? Well, yes, but also no. The reason why is because we're always changing. You're either making more money, making less money, you have a higher expense, you have a lower expense, and sometimes your financial goals change. For example, maybe you really want to buy a home in the near future, in which case you'd want to save a lot. Or maybe you don't care about buying a house and instead you want to travel the world, in which case you'd probably rather spend that money instead. Point is, as your needs and goals continue to evolve, it makes sense to make adjustments to your budget and savings accordingly. However, how often you should do this is highly dependent on how quickly your income or expenses change. Like for instance, if you just got a raise at work, then you may want to revisit your budget and saving strategy immediately. On the other hand, if you've had the same job for the past 3 years and nothing else has changed, then every 3 years is probably soon enough. Now, the one thing to keep in mind, though, is that even though your personal circumstances are going to change over time, that doesn't mean that your savings amount should follow suit. In fact, the most common mistake that I see is people constantly lowering their savings rate simply because they feel uncomfortable with saving money. Now, yes, it's true that you shouldn't feel tortured saving money, but there's also no reason to save less unless your expenses are increasing. If anything, it's better to stick to your original plan and push through it because that's the whole point of an emergency fund anyway. You're supposed to save up money in the event that something goes wrong. So don't make the mistake of just lowering your savings rate whenever you feel uncomfortable. Stick with your original plan and save as much as you can. That way, in the event of an emergency, you're going to be prepared. Although now, in terms of how much you should be saving by a certain age, there has been a lot of research done on this topic, and one of my favorites comes from Fidelity Investments. They found that in order to retire comfortably, these are the target savings goals that you should aim for. As you can see, by the time you're 30, you should have saved the equivalent of 1 times your salary. By the time you're 40, 2 times your salary. 50, 3 times your salary, and by the time you're 60, 6 times your salary. This gives you a healthy mix of investments that could potentially be liquidated in the event of an emergency without compromising your retirement. And assuming that you're investing that money, hopefully you'll have well over $1 million set aside by the time you reach retirement. The reason why I like this so much is because it's based off of statistics and it provides a good benchmark of where you should be based on your income. However, that's not the only rule of thumb that you could use. Another option comes from Bankrate, who found that the average American has $48,000 in net worth by the time they reach $3,149,000 by the time they reach $4,257,000 by the time they reach 50 and $457,000 by the time they reach 60. These numbers include your home equity, your retirement accounts, minus any debt that you have left over. And unlike the first example, This considers inflation and allows for a much broader range. Even the top 1/3 of earners were found to fall within these ranges, and this includes people who earn well above $200,000 a year. So, in terms of how much you should have saved, those are the guidelines that you could follow. But here's the thing, these are just averages. Everybody's situation is going to be different, and that's why it's important to come up with a personalized plan that works for you. That means you'll want to consider your income, your expenses, your savings, your debts, your lifestyle, your age, your risk tolerance, and what you hope to accomplish with your money. From there, once you get a good idea of where you stand, you'll want to create a written plan that outlines how much you're going to save, what you're saving for, and by when. For example, this is my personal breakdown, and as you can see, my wife and I have calculated our monthly income, our fixed expenses, our variable expenses, and then finally, what we have left over in terms of savings. We took that number and then split it into different categories with different goals in mind. And every single month we track how much we've spent in each category and then adjust accordingly. Now, in terms of how you could put yourself in a position to save more money, there's generally three: increase your income, decrease your expenses, or do a combination of both. In terms of increasing your income, that could mean working overtime, starting a side hustle, asking for a raise, or switching jobs entirely. Whatever you do, it's usually best to focus on increasing your income as opposed to decreasing your expenses, because there's a psychological bias known as loss aversion. This is the idea that the pain of losing is psychologically twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. So, if you cut back on spending, the loss of being able to buy something new is going to hurt twice as much as the gain of saving money is going to feel good. But on the other hand, if you increase your income, then the gain of earning more money is going to feel twice as good as the increase of taxes is going to feel bad. Plus, the reality is the more money you make, the more money you're going to keep because you're going to be in a higher tax bracket. So, it's a win-win situation. The second option is to decrease your expenses. And although this is easier said than done, one strategy that I've seen work really well to implement what's called a no-spend week or a no-spend month. No-spend weeks work extremely well for college students or recent grads who tend to have a lot of discretionary income but don't really realize it. By challenging yourself to go an entire week or an entire month without spending money on non-essentials, you lions begin to understand where your money is going, and you lions start to find creative ways to reduce your expenses. For example, in a recent study, 68% of participants said that they would eat at home more often, 55% would take fewer vacations, and 53% would cancel unused subscriptions. Every little bit adds up, and if you're somebody who's living paycheck to paycheck, this could free up a significant amount of money to put towards your savings. Finally, third, if you're somebody who wants to work on your side hustle, you want to ask for a raise, or you want to negotiate, now is probably the best time to do it. With the labor market continuing to recover from the pandemic, companies are doing whatever they can to retain employees, and that means offering competitive salaries. A good rule of thumb is that if you're underpaid, you should ask for a raise at least once a year. If you're fairly compensated, you should ask for a raise at least once every 2 to 3 years. And if you're overpaid, you should ask for a raise at least once every 5 years. But in general, the worst thing you could do is nothing. Because if you don't advocate for yourself, nobody else will. And it's very likely that your salary will continue to decline as inflation goes up. So, given how fast the economy is growing right now, it's probably a good time to ask for more money. Bottom line is, if you're not comfortable with your current savings rate, now is the time to do something about it. Revisit your budget, consider your long-term goals, and do everything you can to put yourself in a better position financially. So, with that said, you guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, feel free to add me on Instagram. Enjoy. Thank you so much, and until next time.